evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming. We have a very good crowd tonight. I'm proud of you. Bob Luongo, Appointing Director for the Town of Weymouth. And we have consultants here, McCabe Enterprises and Kimberly Hahn, that will be doing a presentation tonight. So tonight, about a year ago, we got a grant from the state to do a planning process up on Bridge Street in North Weymouth from the Fall River Bridge up to the Hingham line to look at a number of issues, transportation issues, land use issues, and zoning issues, design issues, as well as, I believe, marketing issues as well, meaning what type of businesses that we could attract to the corridor along Bridge Street. So we're going to have a presentation tonight. There'll be plenty of time for questions. We ask, this is being televised. It's not live, but it will be, it's recorded and it'll be on WETC this week. Anyone that has a question has to go up to the microphone, else we're not going to be able to hear you and get you recorded when it does appear on WETC. I'd like to thank, we have Councilor Berger here, who is a district councilor up there. Thank you, Councilor Berger, for being here. And we have at-large Councilor Rick Coughlin. Thank you, Mr. Coughlin, for being here as well. We appreciate your involvement and participation in the process. So with that, we'll start the presentation. I think, do we want to take questions during the presentation, Kathy, or would you rather hold them? Yeah, let's get through it, and then we can get the questions going at that time. So, Kathy McCabe with McCabe Enterprises, the show is yours.
Thanks, Bob. And I'm Kathy McCabe. I'm the principal of McCabe Enterprises. My focus is community planning and economic development. And I want to introduce two of my colleagues who are here from Kimberly Hahn. Kimberly Hahn has done a lot of work in the town of Weymouth on transportation, traffic, walkability, travel safety. Lisa Horn in the back is one of our engineers on the team, and Bill Scully, right to my right, is also an engineer, and they've been very involved and will also be presenting many of the recommendations. And I think in terms of Q&A, maybe after we do some of the transportation sections, we'll take 2 or 3 questions, and then we'll go into the more of the planning type questions. So, but there will be ample time for questions and comments. I also have comment cards. There's also a map, and if you want to put any post-its or comments, you can please do that afterwards. So we do want to hear what you have to say. So I want to kind of keep moving along, and because this is cable access TV being filmed, we do ask you to come to the mic, identify yourself, and ask your question, and we'll be staying behind the podium, even though I tend to like to walk around, because that's what cable TV told us we should be doing for the best for our televised audience and our neighbors who couldn't come tonight. So we're going to do a project overview, talk about transportation, market-related issues, both retail market and real estate market, and then talk about land use and zoning. And this is the wrap-up of kind of the study period and planning period, so we do want to hear what you have to say. So this is, Bridge Street has been our focus, along with Bicknell Square. The bright green is our focus area. Why we did a planning study, it wasn't just because the town got a grant. It's because there's been a long time safety concern about speed and congestion on Bridge Street. There's been concerns about vacancies, and that there's been really limited new investment in businesses and properties along Bridge Street. So things are getting a little tired in places. So that was some of the impetus. Some of the key questions are, how do we make Bridge Street look better and be safer at the same time? So there was a dual focus there. And is the existing zoning helping or hurting new investment? And how can we leverage what the town has been spending, much through grant money, but also it's all your tax money, in Beals Park as well as Westcott Beach, that are major public improvements in North Weymouth. So how can we leverage that to stimulate more private investment? So some of you, some of the faces I recognize from prior meetings, some of you may be new, so just kind of do a quick overview of Bridge Street. The study area is 1.85 miles. That is 8.5 acres of pavement. There's almost 500,000 square feet of commercial space along Bridge Street. There's 114 businesses in North Weymouth that employ about 1,100 people. There's the C Street Historic District, which has 122 buildings and objects. There's 2 beaches, 2 state parks, 14 green spaces, and 2 rivers and the sea. How much more could you ask for? Well, you have almost 8,000 residents. You've got nearly 3,500 households, and you have amongst the neighborhoods one of the highest median household incomes, over $100,000 a year. And there are more seats up here, and there are chairs in the back, so feel free to take those chairs. So we know standing can be kind of tiring, so we're glad you're here. So I'm going to turn it over to Lisa and Bill, who are going to talk about some of the findings regarding Bridge Street and Bicknell Square on travel and transport.
Thank you, Kathy. Again, my name is Bill Scully with Kimley Horn and Associates. So we were the traffic planning consultant on this project. Some of you may have joined us. We've been doing a Vision Zero and Safe Streets for All project townwide. So we've had a number of things going on over the past year that you might have joined us for that. So what I'm going to do is just go through a few slides to summarize some of the traffic characteristics that we see out there. And then Lisa's going to talk about some of the actions related to walkability and transit, as well as some of the other things. So on this slide, you can see Bridge Street. The corridor is about in the middle of that picture. The 2 blue circles were locations where we did some additional traffic data collection. And in that, with that data collection, we saw that the Bridge Street volume of traffic in last year, so post-pandemic, is really around 29,000 vehicles per day on Bridge Street. It may get a little bit higher, maybe down by Lowe's, where you have maybe some Hingham and Southern traffic coming up to Lowe's and then heading back. They don't traverse the whole corridor. But you can see it's a fairly good number in terms of amount. It is about 4,000 to 5,000 cars a day less than we had measured about 10 years ago out there. So it's kind of interesting, even though it's still a lot of traffic out there. A lot of times the traffic also, you have some very distinctive peaks. So in the morning, obviously, commuter traffic for a couple of hours in the morning, and in the afternoon, that peak commuter traffic as well. And then usually we see a trough during the course of the middle of the day where volumes are a little bit lower. So we also measured traffic speeds out there. Posted speeds change a little bit depending on where you are in the corridor. Bridge Street east of Bayview, we saw the 85th percentile speed. And 85th percentile, it's above the average. 85th percentile would basically be that speed where 85% of the cars in that spot are going 42 miles per hour or less. 15% of the traffic would be going above that 42%. And a lot of times in the historical past, we set speed limits a lot by that 85th percentile speed. Bridge Street, east of North, we measured 37 miles per hour for that 85th percentile. And that could have been, again, related to a little bit more commercial activity down there. So, things slowing traffic down. You have the signals, a couple of signals there. In general, though, a lot of the traffic exceeded the posted speed limits between 5 and 15 miles per hour. So in the Safe Streets work, the Vision Zero work, we would become concerned or more concerned when we started to see travel speeds exceeding 10 miles per hour or more above the posted speed. It'd be something to look at and go, what's going on? The speeds very much relate to safety and the severity of any crashes that occur out there. Some of the crash data, so the map over there just shows some of the, looks like the, if I can read this slide. So there's fatal crashes and serious injury crashes. So those dark circles over there, serious injury crashes are those that we say leaves a person incapacitated. So you're alive, but you might not be able to work, or you can't do the things you normally did before the crash. So in terms of quality of life, and it goes down, as well as you certainly affect a lot more people around you, family members or what have you. But in total, over a 6-year period, we saw 383 crashes reported on the corridor, 1 fatal crash and 7 serious injury crashes. And then there's some statistics of, when we look at crashes, we look at, types of crash, were they daytime, nighttime? So some of this summarizes that. In addition, we saw 3 crashes with bicycle, 1 of which resulted in serious injury, 7 crashes with pedestrians, and then one with a pedestrian was the fatal, and then there were 3 non-fatal injuries, and then 3 where no one got really hurt. So Mass DOT, they look at crash data, and they start to look at cluster of information, cluster of data, so that it helps them guide federal aid funding. And what they have, there's a funding program that relates to Highway Safety Improvement Program, or HSIP. So on this map, you can see 2 orange cluster areas, one at Bicknell Square and one at North Street, are showing up as clusters with DOT and DOT data. The bad news is they show up as clusters. The good news is that starts to give a possibility for funding in making some improvements at those locations. So as I mentioned a couple seconds ago, speeds have a big factor of severity. So what this chart, and you can see a lot of different examples of this chart, 20 miles per hour if a pedestrian gets hit by a car going 20, chances are that pedestrian's going to live. Might be hurt, may not be hurt, but you're not going to become a fatal statistic. But you go 40 miles an hour, and there's a pretty much solid chance that you're going to be a fatal pedestrian. So that's where we start to take notice of the speed. So if everyone's going on Bridge Street and going 40 or 45 miles per hour, and you're trying to, encourage connectivity from one side of bridge to the other, whether at a signal or not at a signal, people want to use the park or get to the post office, that speed of 40, 45 mile per hour, if you're not safely crossed and you do get hit, then it becomes a very serious injury or fatality. So summary of the analysis of the traffic conditions that we saw out there, things to keep in mind as we go into identifying some potential actions to take. Certainly excessive speeds. So we're above the speed limit. We'd like to get people driving a little slower. The left turn movements, either from Bridge Street or trying to get onto Bridge Street from the side street, certainly become difficult, certainly in the peak hour when there's a lot of volume. During the peak hour when there's a lot of volume, traffic might actually be going a little slower, but you can't get out there because of the volume. In the middle of the day, when there's less traffic, now people are moving a little bit quicker, so then that becomes an issue or a problem. Shoulders are that part of the roadway that's outside the travelway and between the curb. So right now on Bridge Street, there's very little shoulder on much of the corridor, so that that affects also, you know, bike accommodation. If someone was biking on the street, you know, that would be a difficult or constraint. We did look at parking in a very general sense, and it really came up during the land use and the marketability of economics out there. But a lot of the parking out in the corridor is privately controlled. In some lots, and Kathy will probably talk about it more later, you have a lot of excess parking on private lots, but there's not much public parking unless you are parking on C Street and a couple of the other ways. I'm not talking about in the neighborhood where you may end up being able to park on street in front of the houses. And then other things out there that we saw, you know, and Lisa will mention it again, but certainly walking along Bridge Street is not comfortable. The conditions aren't great. The driving, some input that we got over the last year, you know, some people don't know to use the jug handle down by the Back River Bridge, down to the other side, the east side. So then that messes everyone up because you can't take a left onto Green Street at that area. So anyway, so we've taken a lot of these problem areas or issues, the data, as well as then the input that we got from all of you at the workshops that we had last year, and then that would lead us to identifying some potential actions to, again, balance the objectives that Kathy mentioned. You know, how do you make the corridor safer and look better, you know, for one thing, if you wanted to look at the bigger overall picture. And Lisa.
Thank you. So as Bill alluded to, we're going to talk about walkability, transit, what's out there today, and then kind of talk about the recommendations. As speaking with you all today in our previous meetings is that sidewalks are generally provided on Bridge Street, north and south side, but the conditions of it is more of like poor to average, just indicating like there's some areas where it's really narrow, you can only fit one person, you can't really walk side by side, or just the conditions, it's overgrown, it's not maintained, it's not something that you could thoroughly enjoy every single day, but really just understanding what's out there today. We also took a look at the crossing. So as Bill was alluding to is that there are a lot of, there are signalized intersections. At these signalized intersections, that is where majority people can actually cross safely. And as you remember when we were looking at the speeding and how likelihood a person could die from a pedestrian, from like a fatal or serious injuries, depending on how fast you drive, is that if there's no safe crossings outside of those signalized intersections, we really need to make sure that people can actually cross safely. So at 4 of the signalized intersections, what's great is that they have an audible pedestrian signal, just indicating that when you press the button, there's gonna be some voice, audible hearing that you can cross safely, you can cross on a certain direction. Not every signal has that. Neck and Green Street doesn't have it, as well as the shopping mall driveway. So crosswalk markings are really just provided at the signalized intersections as we were alluding to, but there's a lot of side streets. Maybe they don't all have marked crosswalks, but you can cross those locations. Really just try, as our recommendation is really enhancing those. And these crosswalk markings are just standard in the sense that it's just parallel lines, sometimes not as visible, but really just seeing how we could enhance those visibility when we're thinking about recommendations. As Kathy and Bill is alluding to, is that we want to make sure Bridge Street, Bicknell Square, it's safe, it looks good, people actually wants to cross the street and actually enjoy the area and really connect between these north and south side along Bridge Street, as well as these neighborhoods and parks. As Kathy was alluding to, there's a lot of great things happening in this location. We just got to make sure that there's connectivity. So in general, looking at the highlights of the walkability, it's really reconstruct sidewalks. As we were talking earlier today, a lot of people were just saying, reconstruct the sidewalk, maybe widen some of the sidewalk areas, maybe make it a little bit wide and not just 5 feet, maybe 7 feet or so forth. Really making sure that the locations where there are overgrown shrubbery, really maintain that, because if it's not maintained, that sidewalk becomes really narrow. Looking at these existing standard crosswalk, just like those parallel bars, identify those locations and really make it more visible, really making sure that when you're driving, walking, that you can actually see those marked crosswalks, and that's going to be along the signalized intersections as well as those side streets as well. And then we talked about crash data, and Bill was talking about when we look at crash data, we look at lighting conditions. So really just making sure that there are pedestrian lighting along the corridor to make sure that when you are walking, there is safe connectivity, people can see you. So we talked a little bit about, Bill talked about vehicles, traffic. We just went over the pedestrians, and we're going to talk about a little bit about transit and really understanding what is out there today. So there are 2 bus routes along the corridor. So they're Route 220 and 222. And what's great is that when you're taking the bus, it really helps out on how you can get to somewhere if you don't have a means to a car, or if something is happening with your car, you have another mode of transportation. So there are 2 routes, and there are a lot of stops, and there's a lot of connectivities with these bus routes. So when we're looking at bus route 220, which is along the corridor, it connects you through like Quincy Center, as well as the Red Line, as well it can connect you to the commuter rail. Along this route, there are about 14 bus stops along the corridor. So then when we're looking at bus route 222, very similar, it connects you to Quincy Center, to Bicknell Square, as well as other locations, but also connects you to the Red Line, as well as the commuter rail. There are 10 bus stops along the corridor, and there's 2 stops in Bicknell Square. So when we're looking at these transit recommendations, we're looking at what has already been done. So the MBTA has done a better bus network, really looking at how can these routes be a little bit more accessible or usable or a little bit more friendly. And then looking at their recommendation, they were identifying on routes 220, just having improved Sunday frequency, really looking to see if we could provide all-day high-frequency service. It's really going to be a collaboration between Weymouth, DOT, and MBTA on these types of stops. There are so many stops. As I just mentioned, there was like 14 stops along one route. There was another 10 bus stops along another route, really consolidating some of these stops, but most importantly, making sure that these transit stops actually have amenities. It's not just supposed, really, we want to make sure that there's shelters, it's weather resistant, especially if it's raining or if it's hot or if it's snowing, just really making it a little bit more accessible, reliable, that people would actually want to take the bus as a mode of transportation. I will hand this off to Bill, where he's going to talk about the recommendations.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. So one thing I did want to mention is, and you all probably know, this is a Mass DOT roadway. They own it, they maintain it. So any changes or improvements, are going to have to go through or with them in collaboration. About 10 years ago, they started to look at the corridor to try to make some improvements. And I'm not sure exactly why it sort of got put on the back burner, but it did for a number of years. So they really brought it up through some of the early analysis, and then it stopped for a long time. They did make some improvements, like some of the handicap ramps were redone over the years. They did resurface it. And I think they were, they had so much else going on in the state, in the region, and even in the town with Main Street, that I think they probably figured, let's resurface it, keep the road going, and then we'll come back and revisit it. So as part of this project, we have had some communication with them. So at one point, they initiated a call saying, hey, we know you're looking at Bridge Street from the land use study. They participated in the Vision Zero Safe Streets for All project, so they knew what was being looked at in some of our committee meeting discussions. So I think that, there's a renewal of interest on DOT's part to start to re-examine the corridor and start to come up with some of the improved actions. I think having those two HSIP locations showing up, that gets their attention a lot. This study, they've said, hey, when you've gotten to a point where you feel comfortable to send us the information, send it to us so that we understand what the town is thinking out there. Before I go into some of the actions, the other thing that I'll say is traditionally, and I know at every meeting we've talked about the condition of the sidewalks, DOT pretty much puts the sidewalk in, makes the town put the sidewalk in on roads that aren't the DOT's. They will not maintain the sidewalk. They could come back and rebuild the sidewalk as part of an overall project, but the town needs to maintain the sidewalk once it's up and running, let's say. And that's either snow plowing, cleaning, if something goes awry with part of the sidewalk, then repair it. So that's something just to keep in mind so that you can put in context some of the improvements and in time frames and things like that. So here, I don't know if it was I don't think it was in the earlier section, but some of the things that we've been talking about is on sections of the road. So remember, I talked about you have a lot of traffic, it's less than pre-pandemic, but it's going really fast. And I mean, we heard the last year, I can't cross the street. There was I don't know if he's here tonight, but someone was here going, I want to walk my granddaughter over to the school, and I don't even like crossing at the signal, So you're in that situation of trying to connect the north and south areas, slow down traffic, and accommodate. Like Kathy's data showed numerous businesses up along the corridor. Each of those businesses have a driveway. So yeah, I'm sure you all have done it. You've seen it. Up and down the corridor, someone's going to stop to make a left turn into a business or one of the side streets. So one action that we like to think about, and I think we're talking about it more from the Evans Street area down towards, as we approach North Street, is to take, instead of having 4 lanes, 2 lanes of through movement in both directions, going down potentially to a 3-lane section. So you'd have 1 lane going, moving through, but that center lane would be for that turning traffic. Whether it's turning from Bridge Street into a driveway or into a side street, or that area also gives you the ability to what we call a 2-step turn. If you were leaving a side street, you could get into that middle lane if you saw someone coming. Once that person passes, then you can move into the through lane. So it's a 3-lane section. And I'll show a couple of pictures of what then does that allow you. Okay, so again, at the earlier workshops last year, we showed you that the right-of-way, so the public right-of-way, that's the area that you have available to do anything, whether it's sidewalks, travel lanes, bike lanes, trees, you've got to do it within that public right-of-way. Right now, within that right-of-way, you're really from back of sidewalk to the other side, back of sidewalk. 4 lanes, it doesn't leave you much room between travelway and sidewalk. People have mentioned walking along the sidewalk. I'm just feeling kind of uncomfortable. I feel like the traffic is right next to me going 40, 45 miles an hour, and I'm a couple of feet away on the sidewalk. So what the 3-lane section can do, and there's 2 pictures here. One is from Charlotte, North Carolina, and the other is from Reading. It's Main Street in Reading, Mass. It allows us to provide more room on the edges. So we only have to, if you have 4 lanes that are 11 or 12 feet wide, then 4 lanes is 44 to 48 feet wide. Well, if we're providing 3 lanes for vehicles, we're probably going to be somewhere around 35 to 36 feet. So we've got 10 to 12 feet available for the sides, for the edges. And then you have a lot of flexibility. You could keep the curb where it is today and the sidewalk, and then make that other room more of a wide shoulder. I'm not saying you'd have to do a bike lane, but one of the requirements from any DOT project is to have bike accommodation. So you can see, like on the far right is an area, if you have enough room on the edge of roadway, you try to separate it a little bit from the travelway, and then you have enough room 4 or 5 feet for a bicyclist to be on the road, and then you have the sidewalk. So there's a lot of different options there, but probably more importantly is if we're able to go in this section of road to a 3-lane cross-section, it gives us a lot more flexibility of what do we want to do on each side of the roadway. So the pictures on the left and the center just are examples that I'm not saying you can make it as wide as that, the sidewalk, but again, if we don't need to provide 4 lanes, then you might end up saying, well, let's kick the sidewalk out, the curb out a couple more feet, and instead of a 5 or 6 foot wide sidewalk, you have an 8 or 9 foot wide sidewalk. You might have then the ability to put some shade trees along the corridor, shade trees along with pedestrian kind of scale lighting along the corridor, but you need that room. And right now, under the way it is today, you've got enough room for the 4 lanes and like 5 foot sidewalks on both sides. So all of that is all good. Okay. Going down to the 3 lanes, the one benefit is we certainly slow traffic down. It may shift some. Do you disagree that it will slow traffic down? Well, if you have 29,000 cars a day going in 4 lanes, and now they really can only go in 2 lanes, then you're going to slow traffic down, especially, most of the day. Most of the day.
What happens when the bridge goes up?
Well, it doesn't, I mean, the bridge is going to,
I just want to remind people, we want to take comments, but we need to have all comments up at the mic so that people on cable TV can listen and everyone in this room can hear. So please save your comments. We definitely want to hear them, and we're definitely going to try and answer them. So, and we'll take a pause to make sure that happens after the transportation.
Thank you, Kathy. So, the bridge goes up now. So, traffic stops when the bridge goes up. Whether it's going to be 4 lanes, 3 lanes, 2 lanes, no lanes, the bridge is going to go up and traffic stops. So, what we're trying to do is present some options for balancing the improvements, slowing traffic down, making crossing easier. Again, another benefit of a smaller section of road is that it's less distance for a pedestrian to cross the street. But anyways, we look at those options, we see benefits to those options, and I'm not saying that they're gonna be an approved kind of an option, because it still needs to go through DOT. DOT might come back and say, well, with 29,000 cars a day, I don't wanna go down to 3 lanes. They may say that. Reading had about 20,000 cars a day when they did their 4 down to 3. Went in as a trial, and then everyone loved it, and DOT was satisfied, and they've kept it as a 3-lane section. So again, we're not saying that you have to do that, but what it has some disbenefits, it has some benefits. And this is just some diagrams of it. So up top, you can see just a illustration of 4 travel lanes, the sidewalks down below. If you can repurpose that pavement a bit, then you're able to either provide that extra room on the edges of the road for biking, as well as tree planting, lighting, and also, there may be areas where you just widen the sidewalk. This is a similar type of thing. I know we did get comments at one of the workshops, especially as we get down to North Street and Green Street, for the call for left turn lanes on Bridge Street to turn into these areas, as well as signal changes to protect the person making the turn into that. And then really, as you go down towards Hingham, because of the commercial activity down there, the large commercial, and the higher volumes, then that area would stay 4 lanes. Certainly needs some signal improvements, and none of the things that I've talked about really get to, we've got pedestrian actions, mid-block crossings, you got a 1.8 mile long corridor. Right now, you can only cross at the signals with some protection. In our minds, it's too long a corridor to just have those locations, so we want to have some mid-block locations with some type of signal protection. All right, so this is what I just went over. I think this just summarizes that. So, So we'll just, so this just summarizes some of the actions that we just went over. So C Street from to Neck and Green, we're talking about potentially reducing that 4-lane section to a 3-lane. You transition with a protected turn lane when you get down to Neck and Green, and make some signal improvements as well. Bridge Street at C Street, we're talking about upgrading that traffic signal. If you remember, it has a little island on for people coming out of C to make a right turn onto Bridge Street. It's potentially, we're talking about tightening that up, getting rid of that little free movement potentially, and then trying to and that's really geared to pedestrian movement to cross Bridge Street. If we don't move, get rid of that little lane there, that little turn lane, then bring that pedestrian crossing. Another thing we heard was, well, you don't have any protection to cross that little right turn lane, so I got to get to that island, and then I got to get across the Bridge Street. So what we're trying to do is, if we can get rid of that island and tighten that all up, and then you just cross Bridge Street under signal control. All of the signals can be updated, both from a traffic point of view, as well as you've seen pedestrian countdown signals at a lot of locations in the region, so you'd upgrade all of that type of equipment. Make sure it's ADA compliant as well, and that's where some of the audible signals come into play. And then Bridge Street at North, so now this is where we're sort of in that transition zone, but talked about designating left turns on Bridge Street, modifying the signal so that you have some protected movements turning from Bridge Street onto the side street. And I think I'll just leave it there, and then we'll open it up for questions or comments.
Why don't you stay up here? Hi, do you want to introduce
Hi,
yourself?
My name's Jim. The three things I want to mention. One is the traffic light that's closest to the church in Bicknell Square has been knocked down 4 times in 3 months, okay? The Abigail Adams sign that's in that little island is obstruction for people who are trying to look across with traffic going south on 3A. The third thing is you talked about improving the look of Bicknell Square and Bridge Street. Could we get an Arby's restaurant at Buddy's? That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Those are good comments, and also it will help in terms of making the case of why MassDOT should invest. If you looked at that crash data, there's at least 1 crash a week, which is, in my mind, a lot for 1.8 miles. Any other comments?
Yeah, my name's Ron Adams. We live in the neighborhood. I don't know where you guys live, but we live in the neighborhood. Okay, and I don't know why you had to go to North Carolina and somewhere else in Massachusetts to look at this 3-lane stuff. All you gotta do is go over by Walmart. Since they changed that, I fear for my life over there. I mean, normally you would think people would converge one at a time. But I've been in the right lane coming up to the merge and had cars speed up to cut me off. And that's exactly what you're gonna do here, all along Bridge Street where you put that. This morning, my wife and I watched this woman who didn't want to follow a truck use that center lane to pass the truck. Double yellow lines on both sides, and it's got the left turn arrows, but she used that, and she started to pass in the middle of an intersection. Okay? Second thing, lots of stats you put out. I didn't hear anything about pedestrian traffic. I mean, what are you talking about? 10 people a day, 500 people a day? Most of the people that I see trying to cross the street are people that work in the area, running from the gas station over to Dunkin' Donut or something. Second part of that is you talk about the bike lanes. Now, I don't know how the town looks at it, but if I'm going to make an investment, I look at return on my investment. You know, how many people are going to be using these bike lanes? Is it really worth spending the kind of money you're going to spend to cut down the traffic flow so you can put in bike lanes? Now, they've got them over by Walmart, and I've never seen more than 1 bike over there, and I can spend hours over there, 1 bicyclist. But that's what they invested lots of money on. So, you know, this 3-lane business, it may slow traffic, but we have a lot of people that are always in a hurry and they're special. And that's gonna create problems that I don't wanna deal with. I mean, we already have enough problem with people running the traffic light at C Street. I don't know how many near misses we've had, and I wait and look both ways for somebody trying to make that light. Yeah,
So-
not a good idea.
I want to thank you for your comments, and it sounds like a lot of people agree, but I want to point out some state policies that are above and beyond our control as a consultant team. One, the Massachusetts Department of Transportation has a policy that when they do road improvements to a state road, they incorporate bike lanes. That is not a debatable issue. The only time I have been able to work with them where it has not been, they have not included a bike lane, was when you could put it on a parallel route. And we have had some discussions about parallel routes with perhaps Evans Street or some, but there is no clear parallel route in North Weymouth to Bridge Street. Bridge Street is your core artery. It's your one linear long street that stretches the whole length of bridge between the two Fore River and the Back River. So there's challenges in that. Bill, do you want to add anything to that? You got to stand up.
Those are all good comments, they're fair. However, so there's a couple things, and I'm not being argumentative, but in our work on the safe streets in the Vision Zero, town-wide, so there's 100 fatalities and serious injury crashes in that data, so that those years of data that have occurred in the town. Not all of them on Bridge Street, but, you know, there's that. The Vision Zero policy did get adopted, and the goal of that policy is to eliminate all fatal and serious injury crashes in the town, whether it's on a state road or a local road. It doesn't, you can say it's gonna you go like this, but it's a challenge, I agree. But there's nothing wrong with that goal. No one should die on the road, whether you're a driver, pedestrian, or biker. I agree sometimes, I mean, DOT will do a project and it'll be room for a biker on the street and you don't see hardly any bikers. I agree. But you got a 5-foot shoulder, whether it's a 5-foot shoulder or a 5-foot bike lane, whether it's one person taking a bike or 10 or 20, they should be able to move safely on the transportation system. So what we try to do in general is try to figure out ways, how can we accommodate that movement? Pedestrians crossing the street, crossing Bridge Street. No one should be hit on Bridge Street crossing the street. Okay, so how can we do that? I think you mentioned, I think it was you, mentioning Bicknell Square running the light. So one of the options in the Vision Zero plan, and again, we don't have we as the town doesn't have the power to do red light running cameras for auto enforcement, but it is a topic that is at the legislature now, and there are discussions of doing it. It is used in other states, Rhode Island included, Connecticut included, and it has a big effect. You know, you're not going to do $50 tickets too much without any argument before you stop running red lights. And you can use that auto enforcement for speed control as well. So that is an action. And in the Vision Zero plan, the town is willing to support that action at the state level to approve enabling legislation, and then the town would be able to adopt it or encourage, and again, in this case, it's DOT's road, but if there's enabling legislation, the town is for it and would support MassDOT for doing, let's say in the signal upgrades, incorporating that auto enforcement technique there. So the only thing I understand, I've looked at Bridge Street for 30 years, so I know what you're saying, but I also sit there and I go, you know, not one person should die or be seriously injured on that roadway, pedestrian, biker, or vehicle. And we just got to figure out a balanced way to do it, and not cause inconvenience to you all, but a lot of times you're in your neighborhoods, not necessarily on Bridge Street, but you might want to cross the street at Bicknell Square in your car even. You should be able to do so safely. So, you know, I mean, we really want to take all your comments. We took them at the 2 workshops. We digested them, and then we rolled that into everything we were doing on the Safe Streets project as well. So, you know, if there's ideas that you have to make things better, like Kathy mentioned, looking for parallel routes. There really isn't parallel routes down there that you could divert a bike to go from one end to the other. There are some things we can do to encourage some biking in other locations on a Bridge Street. But again, you know, another thing is you know, restaurants or whatever. You're in the neighborhood and you take a walk and you want to go to Beals Park. you know, again, you want to feel comfortable walking along the street and comfortable and safe crossing it. So I think that's all I have to add.
Thanks, Bill, and I know there's someone up at the mic, and we can take your question and comment. I'd like to take only one at this point and then take the rest at the end, because I want to make sure we get through all of them and have enough time for times and questions. And we said we'd take 2 or 3 in the middle. So whichever one wants to speak, please do.
Okay, my name is Jim. I'm a local resident. It's all well and good to get grant money from the state to change the roads, but if we're going to make changes that are going to make the situation worse, it's absolutely ridiculous. If they'll put traffic on those sidewalks, is very light, and during rush hour, that's the worst time. Now you're cutting it down to 2 lanes. You're going to have more people running lights because they're going to be bound up. And then having the bridge open and closing is only going to make it worse. To go from 4 to 2 lanes is absolutely insane. And that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you, and we appreciate it. And if you can hold, I would really appreciate it. So, and I'll let you go first, okay? So I just want to add a little data point, or a little anecdotal data point. I have walked Bridge Street several times, the entire length, from Monaquidit to Abigail Adams Park. And I'm surprised I didn't think many pedestrians were there, but I've actually noticed pedestrians. And when I started looking for bicyclists, I was surprised I noticed them. So I don't think there is a lot, but they're present. So just as so on that note, I want to kind of move on, and I want to talk a little bit about demographics and do a little highlight. And some of this is to kind of understand what the private sector and how we kind of improve not just the physical street, but what we would call the walls or the uses adjacent to the street. So one of the things that is interesting to note is, and Weymouth is growing in population, but what's surprising to me is that North Weymouth is the only village center of the 4 that has lost population over the last decade. And this is from 2013 to 2023. So you've lost about 3% of the population. And that's not usually a good sign, because you want to, if you're trying to attract private investment, private investors, businesses want to be in areas that are growing. There's many positive things about the rate of growth. Weymouth is about just about the same rate of growth as the Commonwealth, but North Weymouth is lagging. So let's look a little more about demographics. One of the unique things about North Weymouth is you're the old, with the median age, you're the oldest area of all 4 neighborhoods with a median age of over 52 years, whereas the average median is 44 town-wide. So what's the implication? It's obviously North Weymouth has a significant segment that's over 60, almost 35%, over 35% of residents in North Weymouth are 60 and over. Those who are 80%, over 80 years, it's about 4 to 5% in every neighborhood. But what is unique is that the group of us who are over 60 and living in North Weymouth is significant. There are younger families moving in to North Weymouth. Many of them are locating south of Bridge Street. So you're really at the tip of some generational change. So one of the things that's really important, and what's the implications of this, is that Bicknell Square and Bridge Street need to be age-friendly, which means having clear level walkways and easy access from where you park to where you go into the store is important, and that's important not just for people who are maybe have mobility issues or getting a little older and the knees are getting creaky, but also for young families who might have strollers and kids. Also, periodically having benches, whether that's in Bicknell Square or along Bridge Street, so there's places to sit so people can take a walk, but then also pause. And bathroom facilities at stores and businesses are also an indicator of being an age-friendly business. So those are some of the things that we should encourage. As I mentioned, I think you're about to go through a generational shift, which is the natural evolution of every neighborhood. And that's usually indicative that you also need a variety of housing, because sometimes if someone becomes a widow, some people may want to live in their house until till their very last day, and that's wonderful, and they should be entitled to do so. But some might say, I don't want to take care of that whole house by myself. But I want to be close to my friends. So there needs to be housing options so people can be close to their friends. Also, there's young people who are living at home, who are of age and working, but they want to find a place to live, and they may want to live in the neighborhood, or they want to be, close to, maybe not in their parents' house, but nearby. So having a variety of housing types is important. And growth and regeneration is really important for private investment and from a business perspective. So let's talk a little bit about market conditions. I want to say Beals Park has been like a shot in arm of introducing new life into North Weymouth. When I come by, I always see people at Beals Park. And that has not been the case even before the reconstruction. So that's a real change. It's really activated. I think it's also interested new people in North Weymouth. And I see people of all ages. I see a lot of younger people because of the skateboard park, but I see young families as well as people who are older who can sit and enjoy the area. So I think there's some real options. So I think people are taking notice, and it can be a springboard for new investment, and it's something to build upon. One of the things, and this is no news to you, you have a high amount of auto-related uses along Bridge Street. You have about over 14%, over 15% of your business mix along Bridge Street is auto-related uses, and they're some of your most visible uses. So they kind of predominate, and it's not like you've marketed it as the auto mile. You've got repair shops, you've got used car shops, so the inventory is spread across. So that's usually, it's helpful to have some car repair and servicing businesses in a business district, but having them front and center and having a high amount kind of means your business mix is kind of off kilter. The place where people really go to shop is east of Neck and Green Street, Riverway Plaza, and that area. That's where you have most of your national and regional brands, and that's a really strong area. But your other parts of Bridge Street, there are services businesses, and they could use a little more spark. Republic is a good example of new investment. Only 20% of your business mix is retail. We have about a 10% vacancy, which is not bad post-pandemic, but it's not great either. Restaurants are about 10%, and that was one of your desired uses. So there's ways to improve the business mix. So let's talk about that. We did a survey. This is what you told us. About 3/4 of you want casual family restaurant options. Another 2/3 wanted a bakery. Just less than half thought a bookstore might be a nice addition. And about 40% also wanted a coffee shop. And I know we've got several, local coffee shops, whether it's Everyday Cafe or Michelle's, but I think people were looking for a place to sit, is how I interpret that. So what can we do? You've got some long-time vacancies along Bridge Street. You could add to the mix of services. And, there's a couple of programs that might be helpful. The Massachusetts Storefront Vacancy Program just changed their rules this year. So they will now allow municipalities like Weymouth to apply and get state tax credits to help new businesses who locate in long-time vacant storefronts that have been vacant for 1 year or more. So that might be a way to help provide some financial incentive. Some communities are really starting to grow and support new businesses, whether it's through pitch contests, whether it's through providing pop-up opportunities to really kind of support and develop new entrepreneurs. And that might be something that Weymouth might want to do for not just Bridge Street, but maybe town-wide. And you certainly have some smaller storefronts and buildings that could could be used by a startup business. It's also 1.8 miles is a long way to walk and shop. So you really want focuses concentration. And one of your focus areas is obviously Riverway Plaza and everything east of Neck and Green Street along Bridge. But you also should think about concentrating your commercial uses where people would go in Bicknell Square and from C Street to Sherwood, which is kind of where the Chinese restaurant ends. So that is, you have auto uses there, but we're really suggesting you might think about concentrating and focusing on there, whereas you have almost all residential between Green and North, except for the office on the corner. And you have a fair amount of residential from Sherwood to Montecuit. So those are areas where, mixed use is fine, but thinking more, having a little more residential there. So one of the things that I think in terms of trying to prompt new investment, we can invest in Bridge Street streetscape. And I will take your question at the end. So I did see your hand. So some of the other findings is that there's almost $26 million of opportunity in terms of spending power that's not being captured in North Weymouth of people who live within 1 mile radius of Bridge and C Street. So that's an opportunity. And, but you do have a lot of competition. 72% of North Weymouth residents shop elsewhere on a weekly basis. Some of that I think is for grocery shopping, but it's an indicator that many people are leaving North Weymouth to shop, and we want to capture at least a few more. So what can we do about it? Some of it is fulfilling those market opportunities. There's an opportunity from market analysis information for a limited service restaurant, for some clothing and general merchandise. And the other thing that I think is really important is to promote the concept of shopping local as well as eating local, to kind of encourage people. And I know you're all real North Weymouth fans and boosters, so we got to make sure we boost the local businesses as well. From a real estate perspective, there's various classes of real estate. None of this is really kind of new. The office market is not really a market for Bridge Street. It's very weak. Even downtown Boston has a hard time with offices and is converting offices, high-rise buildings to residential. Retail was rebounding. I think with some of the economic uncertainty and headwinds, things are kind of on pause in many locations. The same thing about the hotel market. That's been recovering from the pandemic, and we started to see some strength building up, but all the economic uncertainty is dampening the outlook, particularly in terms of international visitors, and you might not think you get international, but you have the largest esker in all of North America, so it's something to crow about. There's also, industrial warehouse. You've got an industrial area. That market is a little softer, again, because of uncertainty. The one thing that's pretty robust in Massachusetts, and it's really, is housing. The biggest challenge is interest rates right now and getting permitted. But that is your most robust market. In North Weymouth right now, it's a seller's market as it is all over eastern Massachusetts. You've got 14 homes on the market, so you have a pretty stable housing market. That was about the same that was for sale about a year ago. So, and your existing retail vacancies, some of them are really not rental ready, so it couldn't be like I walk in and I can open up a store within, a week or two, because I have to do so much work to fix up the interior of the store. So if we want to rent up those vacancies, we got to fix them up a little bit. So that's kind of the big picture. So again, the market findings, pent-up demand for residential. The strategies we're encouraging is to encourage mixed-use development and make mixed use easier to permit, and also a good neighbor to existing residential and existing owners. And that means looking at parking requirements, better buffering between residential and commercial, as well as, and I'll explain what I mean by articulated elements a little later, but it really talks about, let's have building design that feels like it fits in the neighborhood and not just put a box up. And one of the things that's important to note is that residential revenues enable existing commercial owners to have another revenue stream so they can fix up their buildings. And many of the proposals that have been, whether along Bridge Street or elsewhere in Weymouth, it's been commercial mixed use, and the commercial user has really depended on having that residential component to make the finances work and be able to make that mortgage payment. So that's really an important realization. If we want to support our small businesses, the residential revenue is almost a mandatory element of a commercial project today. One of the things we think that could do a world of good is encouraging new investment and facade upgrades. And this was an example that we did of what if we took the Panda Rug building. And I didn't show the existing conditions because I figured you all knew what it looked like. And you have one that's on the top is very much a quick fix, kind of just spruce it up, clean up the windows, put some awnings, put some planters. Not a lot of big investment. That would be a very low cost approach on the top. This was what they call a taxpayer lot building when it was initially built. It was built as a placeholder to pay for real estate taxes so they could maybe build bigger someday. But you could really take the mansard roof off and uncover it and paint it up and fix it up. That's kind of a mid-level, or you could put a new sign ban and be a little quirky about it, and that's a little more modernized approach. Any of those three would probably be an improvement. You might all have preferences, but those are just illustrative examples of one kind of notorious building that you all recognize. So one of the questions we had is, how is the zoning helping or hurting private investment? So let's look at land use. So we mapped up all the principal land uses. We know industrial is on, by the Fore River. We know we have some lovely parks with Abigail State Park and the Great Esker Park. On the Back River, we have a lot of big commercial on east of Neck and Green Street. But what's interesting is the yellow is all residential. So you have really between C Street and Green and Neck Street a fair amount of residential. On the south side of North Street, you've obviously got the park and you have some commercial. You also, the reason why we're saying let's focus and concentrate on commercial, looking at between Sherwood and C Street, is that's where you see the red and kind of the magenta is for restaurant and bars. You also have the brown triangle for auto uses, but concentrate it there and focus on trying to strengthen that area. And looking more at mixed use between Montequitta and Sherwood, as well as, enabling a mixed use in the future. So this is kind of what I just described as kind of looking at, if you were just going to look at it from a strip perspective, you've got industrial, where it's currently existing by the Four River Bridge, or you've got what we would call mixed use with residential, kind of at both between a strip between Montequitta and Sherwood, and also between North and Neck Street, and then concentrate in the middle from Sherwood and Bridgebrow all the way to C Street. In the center, you have neighborhood center district zoning already, and you would maintain that. And then, east of Neck and Green, you've got your business to commercial area, your commercial corridor, and kind of maintaining that. That needs new investment and improvement, particularly where some of the vacancies are on the north side of the street, and as well as on the one on the south, but they're a little more isolated, and you've got the strength of Riverway Plaza. So as I've kind of summarized this, and this is just one of the things we would say on the two ends, where we talked about mixed use with residential, we would recommend disallowing new auto-related uses. So I know there's a Prime gas station there now. They would be allowed to stay as long as they maintain as a gas station. But if they were to ever close and be closed for more than a year, that use could not then become a new gas station or new auto-related use. So it's really kind of, the goal is to kind of keep the auto uses in your concentrated commercial area or east of Neck and Green Street. And also with the mixed use with residential, allow residential not just on upper levels, but also on ground levels. So to kind of keep moving it forward. One of the key issues in your zoning is your parking requirements. And right now, you require 2 spaces for every dwelling unit. So even if a unit is a studio or a 1-bedroom, you require 2 parking spaces for it. And in Jackson Square, they're allowing 1.5 parking spaces per housing unit. You've got 1/3 of your households in Weymouth that only have 1 resident. So unless they're a car collector, they're most likely only going to have 1 car. And so we need to kind of be a little flexible and rethink about it. Some of the things about adjusting parking standards is it uses less land, so you have more permeable land, which is a good thing in terms of the rain and stormwater. It facilitates reuse, and also having shared use parking is often permitted with mixed use buildings, so that's a plus. So some of the strategies is that we would encourage flexibility in enforcing the parking regulations by the Zoning Board of Appeals and during site plan review, so they could be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, or the option could be there. We think it might be smart that North Weymouth is the only village center in Weymouth that does not have a municipal parking lot, so that when an opportunity comes up where there could be a municipal acquisition and creation of some small parking both on the north and south side, we would suggest that the town do that, but we have not identified any specific locations. We think it would be better in close proximity of the concentrated commercial area. We would lessen the minimum residential parking to 1 space per unit for 1-bedroom and studios, and 1.5 spaces for 2-bedroom. Again, we think there should be some flexibility. And I think, one of the things about trying this out is see how it works. You can, if you find it a problem, you can always, exercise your flexibility and not, give that opportunity to people. One of the things that's important to realize is right now your zoning requirements require 5 retail spaces for every 1,000 square feet. So a 1,000 square foot is a fairly small store. And usually at that, if you have 1,000 square foot store, there's only one person working in that store at a time. And that's particularly true today when there are fewer retail staff people than there were 20 years ago when you enacted your zoning regulations. So you don't need more parking for employees. And if you make Bridge Street more walkable, you don't really want people to drive and then stop one place and then drive 2 blocks and stop the other place. You want them to be able to drive, park, and maybe walk a block or a block and a half to the next place. 5 parking spaces require 1,000 square feet of land for 1,000 square foot. So it just multiplies. 1,000 square foot size store requires the same amount for cars, and the likelihood of needing 5 cars at any one time is pretty low. That's for retail. I'm not talking about restaurants. So that's something that should be revisited, and that's why enabling flexibility and enforcement and allowing the zoning board to grant variances on that would allow more flexibility, particularly for the smaller storefronts, but then still protect you from making sure that there's enough parking. And I want to say this is what we would say is minimum requirements. We're not talking about parking maximums. So that also lets building owners and store owners who think they need more parking, they can build more parking. So it lets the market, have some say in that. One of the things that is really clear from our discussions is that community character and appearance is important to you. And you care about North Weymouth, and you care about Bridge Street, and you want it to be nice. And so we think it's really important to have a preference and make this part of site plan review and the new project review is to have buildings with what they call articulation. And on the upper left, we did a visual preference questionnaire at our first workshop, and that's the style of building that people most preferred. And you can see it has a gable roof. It also has dormers. It has, siding and shutters on the top, adding some interest and variation in massing. It has brick on the lower. That's an example of what they call an articulation when you're talking about architecture and building design. The photo on the right is more of a building that's a box with some windows. That has what we call no articulation or very limited articulation. So we don't want to tell people how to build or what to build, but we want to give them some guidance on what types of things the neighborhood would feel more comfortable with. So we're suggesting that the zoning also require that buildings have articulation, like gable roofs, like mansard roofs, because you have mansard as part of your historic fabric. So that you have different, perhaps different types of materials in terms of massing. So providing a broad palette without any strict regulations, but making sure they're cognizant of that, so you don't get boxes. One of the things that's really important is landscape. And that came through in some of the discussions And I think, when we talked about height, people really thought it was better if there was more landscaping in front. So I think that needs to be encouraged, and we would recommend that. But also in terms of making the sidewalk more comfortable, particularly like in the image of the gas station on the left, where you might have a small planting wall and some plants. You might not be able to put trees given you don't have a lot of depth. Actually, there's a really good example of how it's done well on Bridge Street at Rosemont Place. So there's some good examples. So we would say that's something that should be encouraged. Some of the other things about buffering is having arborvitae as part of the buffer between residential and commercial, we think would be a really positive. Sometimes you need both fencing and shrubbery. That's a positive. We also think there's a concept in zoning called what we call step backs. How many people have heard of what a setback is? You know, that you've got to have so many feet away from the front sidewalk or the front. So instead of, and that's usually on the ground plane where your yard is. One of the things that sometimes a building that's a little taller, and particularly since there are narrow lots along the commercial side of Bridge Street, that, people might be able to put a 2 or 3 story building on the front of Bridge Street, but there's a house right behind it. So if it's set back maybe 6 feet or 10 feet, it gives the homeowner a little more privacy, so it's not this big looming box behind it. So if you look at where that kind of olive green wall is, think of that as the back of the building facing the backyard, that there, after the first story or the second story, there would be, the building would not go straight up, it would be set back or stepped back so that you have less shadow, you have a little more privacy. It's a building construction strategy that makes for better neighbors. So that's something to explore. So I can't not talk about Bridge Street and recognize that water is a major feature of this neighborhood. And certainly we need to think about the water in the sea and sea level rise. And this is from the Massachusetts Coastal Zone Commission. They have done analysis of sea level rise and flooding for the years 2030, 2050, and 2070. And this is, showing a portion of Bridge Street for 2030. And they've identified and they have modeled how much depth of flooding. So how serious, is this a big problem? Is it a little problem? Do we really need to pay attention? But from a Commonwealth perspective, the potential flooding is in the roadway by 2030 due to what they anticipate would be sea level rise or storm surge in the event of a hurricane or northeaster. So while it's not a long distance along Bridge Street, this was an area that was also identified as highly prone to erosion. So, and the depth of flood that is projected could be as high as 18 to 24 inches in 2030. So that's only 4 years from now. So I think this points to the need to encourage MassDOT to reinforce the right-of-way, to protect it. But it also means one of the things about protecting is that that's a good place not to have a lot more pavement, because that will just erode, and having more landscape there and open space there from a residential perspective or a driving perspective, you would have that vista unencumbered, but it also, the landscape could protect the road. And that is something that's with what we call green infrastructure or plantings, essentially. So thinking about that along the lots that really face onto Kings Cove, because those lots are also narrow and several of them are vacant. So that's a real key issue to think about in the future. So we have covered the waterfront, and we've talked about market and land use and some of the implications of zoning, and we've talked about traffic and walkability and transit, and I promised you that you could go first in your comment, and I saw a couple of hands, and I want to be able to address that. So I want to open it up to your comments. We really, we're going to, I noticed a couple camera shots. We will be making this presentation. Bob will have it at the Department of Planning and Community Development tomorrow, so you can get it from him in full if you didn't. And also, we will be doing a report, and Bob will have that so to share in the next couple weeks. So we want your feedback. We're listening, so I'll turn it over to you. And thank you for your patience.
I want to preface this by saying I speak only for myself, for nobody else. Everybody has their own opinions, and their opinions are respected. My name is Beth Crawford. I am a lifelong North Weymouth resident, and I live in Bicknell Square. Lisa, I believe your name is. Lisa, I truly loved a lot of what you had to say about fixing up the sidewalks, about, repairing them, about making them look better, about making them safer. I loved what you had to say about, making sure the traffic signals are, safer, the more modern ones. I appreciate the majority of what you had to say, and I thank you. And Kathy, I do not want cookie cutter buildings in my neighborhood. This is not downtown Boston. This is not Quincy Center. Those cookie cutter buildings, we're gonna end up with one of them. It's too late now, and that sits in my yard. I do not want cookie cutter buildings. They are ugly. They have no character, right? I know you've said that the bike lanes are unavoidable. And there was a lot covered tonight, and I will probably forget some of the things that I planned on saying, so I want to focus on what really stood out to me a lot. This thought of dropping us down to 2 lanes is horrific. It is awful. It is a bad idea. I drive Bridge Street 7-8 times a day to work, home from work, to the store, to get my kids, to go to the post office. I drive Bridge Street 10 times a day. Having that drop down to 2 lanes, I don't know where everybody is from, and I did not hear much said about the bridge. When that bridge opens, it backs up 2 lanes of traffic for probably 1.5 miles. It's backed up for 20 minutes. We all know how to go around it. It is, maybe longer. We all know how to go around it. It is an acceptable excuse in North Weymouth to be late for wherever you want to be by just saying the bridge is up. We've lived with it all our lives. You showed a slide that said that we have the oldest population in Weymouth. That's because we stay. Because we love our neighborhood and we stay. We don't leave. We have lived with that bridge all our lives. We have lived with 4 lanes of traffic all our lives. We're fine with that. At least I am. I apologize. I shouldn't be saying we. I speak only for myself. In the summertime, I don't think anything was talked about the traffic going the opposite way, going to Nantasket Beach. That is backed up for miles. That's backed up for miles. So when that bridge goes up, and it backs up, now it's only 1 lane. It's gonna back up, instead of 1.5 miles, it's gonna back that all the way up into Hingham. And then when it finally closes, it's gonna take another 10 minutes for that traffic to get flowing again. With 2 lanes, at least the traffic gets flowing again in a reasonable time frame. I have the strong feeling that if it's not broken, don't fix it. 4 lanes of traffic is fine. It has worked all these years. There is no reason to change it. Thank you. There is no reason to change it. I was shocked that, your studies showed that people drive as slow as they do. I thought they drove much faster. You're saying they only drive between 5 and 15 miles over the speed limit? I thought they drove much faster. If that study was done over a 6-year period of time, obviously nobody wants car accidents, nobody wants injuries, nobody wants deaths. But over a 6-year period of time, that doesn't seem like a lot of car accidents to me. There's gonna be car accidents everywhere. If it's not broken, please don't fix it. Fix our sidewalks, fix our traffic lights, fix the vacant buildings in our neighborhood. Don't mess with our street. Just please don't. And somebody may take this as disrespectful. Bill, I watched you smirk and disrespect my neighbor here. I don't know this man, but to mimic his facial expression and to smirk and mimic him shaking his head, that was not a good look. You're asking us to respect your professionalism. Please respect us as well. Thank you.
I want to say thank you for your comments, and I think you raised a really good point about the capacity volume of the street for queuing when the bridge is up. And I don't think we've exactly looked at that question, but no, it is huge. So I'm really glad you articulated that, so thank you. And I think we're hearing you, and thank you for delineating some of the things. So I want to hear from other people, but I also want to let people. I saw a couple people leave. I have comment cards, and we can pass them out, and I also have pens if you need it. So this is not to limit your comments. This is to, some people may not be microphones might not be their thing. So we'll pass these out. And if anyone else wants to stand up and either ask a question or get clarification or make additional comments, please do.
Yeah, sorry, I'd like to make a couple more comments. Going back to safety, I don't think there's a person in this room that is not concerned about safety on C Street or on Bridge Street. So, my question to Bill and the rest of you is, according to your data, 60-something% of the accidents over this 6-year period were attributed to rear-end accidents. So the question is, how is changing this to 3 lanes going to change that? Because most rear-end accidents are attributed to lack of attention. And I would be willing to bet that a lot of the other accidents are the same, which all comes down to drivers. So, you can do whatever you want to do to the street. I don't see that it's going to change people's attitudes and the way that they drive to significantly enhance the safety on Bridge Street. The other part of my comment is a lot of your stats look at North Weymouth. Some of your stats look at Weymouth. And those stats that look at Weymouth are skewed when it comes to North Weymouth. And I think that needs to be clarified.
Thank you. Bill, do you want to, or Lisa, do you want to say anything?
Let's see, I think it was. Let's see. Oh, hey Kathy, what is the?
Yeah. What do you want to get to?
I want to get to the 60%.
Right here. And then also,
Yeah, the bottom one, 62%.
it's the daylight.
Oh,
It's the daylight.
Daylight.
All right, so that was daylight, but 26%, see in the 4th bullet down, 26% were rear end crashes, 36 angle. So, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, driving behavior, that's one of the things that we really have stressed in the Vision Zero plan of making people more aware, more mindful of, again, if you're going 40 miles an hour and you hit a person by mistake, that person is likely going to die. Going slower than that person will not, or a better chance not. So part of Vision Zero is taking a pledge, and what we've been trying to do is spread that word and that attitude around throughout the town. The rear end type crashes, and I think we've probably heard pretty solid of, it's going to be a 4-lane road. What we will have to do is address the intersections. A lot of times the rear end crashes that are occurring, if they're occurring at the intersection, at the signal, then it's that the light is ready to turn, let's say to yellow, someone in front stops, the one in back might think, oh, you're gonna go, and then you have the rear end. But it also occurs when, let's say you're following someone in the inside lane, and all of a sudden the person in front of you puts the brakes on quick, signal, taking a left, and now all of a sudden you're hitting that person because of quick stops to turn. And again, I'm not saying that we're going to do a two-way left center lane here, but that's what that center lane addresses. It pulls that person out of the through movement so that presumably that type of crash won't occur. But I mean, you're right. So I mean, a lot of the things that you've raised or the data that shows, there's a lot of different actions. And we didn't go through every single one, but when you update the traffic signals, you look at the timing. What is the timing? People at a couple of the workshops at a couple of the intersections said, I really don't feel comfortable making a left turn at this signal because there's not an arrow. So, it's taking a look at that. And can you put the arrow in and still make the signal work? The pedestrian improvements, we've talked at the intersections, it'd be better markings, better pedestrian indications. But then also along the route, there may be some mid-block areas that, again, with certain types of actions, signals, you can stop traffic to let a pedestrian cross. So, and the only other thing I'll just say is that, along those lines of, well, I don't see many pedestrians or bikes out there. And Kathy mentioned as she walked along the whole corridor, you do see them. Sometimes people aren't there because things aren't good. So I noticed that even in the town I live in, for almost all the time I've lived in where I do, there was not a sidewalk on the main street. And you would occasionally see kids or adults walking in the road because that was the only place they could be. And then about a couple of years ago, they put a sidewalk in finally, along one side. And all of a sudden, you just see people on the sidewalk. Now, they probably were walking maybe in their neighborhood, but now the sidewalk is on the main street. They come out of their neighborhood and they walk down to the store, or they go jogging a mile, but on the sidewalk. So sometimes not having the good facilities or the things that make you feel safe and comfortable, if they're not there, that's also preventing, people making a good decision. They're saying, I'm not going out there. But now you start to make it more comfortable and safe. You encourage and give them that choice. So anyways, that's all I wanted to say on that. And I apologize if you think I smirked at you.
Can I just make a comment? My name is Lisa Nolette. I live in North Weymouth. I moved here about 40 years ago. And I've seen young people, I want to just address the, I guess the residents moving out. I've been here for 40 years, so I guess I'm not going anywhere. But I will say, some young people have moved into the neighborhood where I live, and they get frustrated after about 5 or 6 years. They thought, the town had made some promises about, cleaning up 3A, about Bridge Street, about taking down some signage, about beautification. And, I think we've all been making jokes under our breath about a building that just went up where there used to be a garden center. It is the most hideous-looking building, and it's brand new. So I hope that the town of Weymouth implements a lot of what you're talking about. There hasn't been any mention of, signage, some of the billboards that are along the route. I'm kind of a believer. My dad was a coach, and I played sports. If you build it, they will come. And if you look at the beautiful Bicknell Park, which I'm really proud of, the only time you would see children there would pretty much be in the winter when we're out there to slide, right? And look at it now, and I'm 68. I want to go there and watch the kids, skateboard, and we were just talking about that. I don't know about the 4 lanes. I will say, I was on the road every day. I was a road warrior when I worked, and Quincy Shore Drive has lots of lights. It's 4 lanes. It has lots of recreation with the beach and the parks and the walking. So I don't know, as another option, no one wants more lights, but if you time it right, the flow
Slow
of
it down,
traffic
yeah.
moves along. I've never been in an accident on 3A. I have a heavy foot. I have slowed down because I heard at a North Weymouth Civic meeting, they give out over 200 tickets in one day. So I think we might need more of a police presence also on Bridge Street. And I would love to see, I'm a proud Weymouth resident. I write on all my, notices, Weymouth by the sea, and I think this is just a great community. I love how passionate everybody is. And I think we can come to some consensus on what should be done. And I think there's a lot of great stuff in this. And I hope we all, figure it out and keep the conversation open. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up with Bill on the sidewalk issue and to your comment on improvements to sidewalks. So let me just, so I don't have an example from North Carolina or wherever. I have an example from Route 18 Main Street, happens to be the street I live on. The state did the roadway over several years ago, and they put all new sidewalks on it. And there has definitely been a tremendous increase in pedestrians walking on Main Street. I know that. I live on Main Street. I see people walking their dogs. I see husband and wife with a baby carriage. So it has really improved pedestrian activity along Main Street. I happen to live near the hospital on that section of Route 18. But just those improvements to the sidewalks, and I can tell you, I've been there since 1987, when there were hardly any sidewalks and they were in disrepair. No one was walking on that street. So I would have to say on a pecking order, if we don't do anything else, let's get the sidewalks done, because I think it will bring more activity. And the example is go down to Route 18 and look for yourself. Thank you. Kathy, are you?
And there was another person who wanted to speak
Yep.
who had a little mobility issues, so I want to turn it over.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Kathy. Hi, my name is Eileen Burwill. I live on Monadequat Street. It's Monadequat Street. I've been there 48 years, raised my family there. You guys appreciate all the work, the hard work that went into this. And thank you, there's some great ideas here. The traffic, I don't have the answers, but I was in an accident. My neighbor was almost killed. There's no crosswalk at the end of we're at the end of the bridge, obviously. And I don't think you have addressed that area as much as further up on Bridge Street, and that's a very critical area because people are coming off the bridge very fast, and you take your life in your hand when you try to get out of the street, any of the side streets, because it's almost like they speed up, they don't let you out. There's no signal there, there's no crosswalk there, there is a bus stop there. I don't know how people could possibly cross that street to get to that bus stop. It's a little horseshoe area, there's several streets there. And as I said, it's a great little neighborhood, there's some businesses there. The answer with the park is awesome. There's a lot of great people that live in that area. And my husband and I, cancer survivors. I lost my sister to cancer, lost a lot of neighbors to cancer. There's a lot of industry in the area. There's a lot of health issues in the area. None of that was addressed at all. And maybe it shouldn't be in this forum. However, the traffic, I see people going through red lights. They don't obey the speed limit. They go very fast on Bridge Street, coming off the bridge, going up Bridge Street. There's a gas station on the corner of Bluff. Very dangerous because people are coming in off the road into the gas station. They block that street. You can't even get out of the street. So there's a lot of issues, there's a lot of problems. I love the idea about wanting to make things look nice, the landscaping, I think that's awesome. I don't have the answers. I don't know. I think maybe more lights, and I know that's awful, but like the other lady said, maybe more lights to slow people down, give people a chance to come out their street and to be safe in the area. I don't know. I like I said, I wanted to thank you guys. You did a great job. I saw a lot of good stuff. The traffic, I don't know what the solution is for that. It's very dangerous. It's very dangerous. And like I say, I was hit one day. I was in an accident. I'm trying to come out of my street. And what happens, I'll make this point, what happens when there's 4 lanes is if somebody stops in one lane to let you out, the other person doesn't. So you have to really you maneuver to try to get, I got the finger. I got the finger the other day because the person stopped to let me out, and I'm scooching my way out, and the other guy was, I literally made him have to stop because I needed to get out. And I got the finger because he had to stop to let me out. And there's a red light. So if there's a red light, they can't go anywhere anyway.
Right.
But they don't let you out, and it's a serious issue, and it's a dangerous issue. And as I said, I don't know what the answer is. I appreciate the ideas, but there has to be more crosswalks, more lights. I don't know what it is, but it's the police. We went to that meeting. 50 speeding tickets were given out on Bridge Street that day. 200 tickets, 50 were on Bridge Street for speeding.
Wow.
I said, all they have to do is sit at the end of the bridge and they make a fortune every day. Just give it to the town, because, there should be, and you say it's a state road, so I guess that would be state troopers, not necessarily Weymouth Police. But the Weymouth Police are great, and when we have issues, they respond quickly and they take good care of us. So I guess that's all. I just needed to say,
Okay.
it's an adequate street.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think, Bill, I think one of the issues is, especially where you live, there's really not a break in traffic because they're coming in from Quincy and you're not getting that little break in traffic to get you out of there. So that's a good point. Maybe we can look at that and see. But it's hard over there because they're coming in from Quincy off of that bridge. And I sympathize. I know what you're talking about because when I'm trying to get out of my driveway on Main Street, I have 4 lanes of traffic too. I've gotten the finger several times because you have to inch out. Okay, guys, thank you. I really appreciate you all coming out tonight. I really appreciate everybody being so respectful tonight. This is one of the best meetings I've attended. Everyone was orderly. I really appreciate that. The slideshow, Kathy will give it to me tomorrow. I'll head up on the webpage. Any comments you have, you can email me at the planning department, Luongo@weymouth.ma.us, or call us So hope you have the slideshow up tomorrow, and we'll have the report out in a few weeks. Yeah?
Super quick question. How is the best method, and do we need a better method of making the residents and the people in town more aware of these meetings? I
Yeah.
just found
Yeah.
out that this was going on. I
Right.
wasn't even aware that there had been previous meetings regarding this.
Unfortunately, it's
what is
social
the-
media, because we do send a press release to the Patriot Ledger. They don't put it in, as you know, the Ledger has very little local coverage anymore.
Is there like an email system that can be developed so
There
that?
is, if you go to the town's website, there is an email system that will notify you of meetings.
Okay.
So you have to go to the town's website and get yourself registered.
That's good
And
to know.
so if it's a town meeting, it will automatically come up on your email.
Great, I will make sure to do that.
Okay.
And maybe
Yeah,
we can
it-
get out
it
on
is
social
tough.
media that,
But I'm
how to do
I'm so
that.
impressed with the number of people here tonight, so
That's
it
because I
got out
raised a
there.
stink on social media.
Okay.
I want to thank all of you, and thank you for your comments and feedback. If you have more comments, please feel free to either drop off the green cards at the table, or you can give them to me. There's also a couple pens at the table if you didn't have a pen. And we will take your feedback and listen very hard and take it into consideration. So thank you for coming. And I also want to thank the counselors for their help and support.